Good evening, everyone. We are going to reconvene open session, and I would ask all that are willing and able to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and I will just say before we get started with our agenda that I hope we have a full house tonight for some very important reasons. So I hope that after our truth and taxation hearing agenda item, those of you who came specifically for that will feel inclined to stay to hear the work of the board as well as help us to celebrate the terrific honors we have tonight to present. So thank you. Okay, so we are at the truth and taxation hearing. And at 7:31 p.m. I call this public hearing to order on Thursday, December 19th, 2019 for the Oak Park and River Forest High School 2019 tax levy. Notice of this public hearing appeared in the Wednesday Journal, December 11, 2019. Wednesday, December 11, 2019 edition of the Wednesday Journal newspaper. At this time, I ask for any written or oral comments to be received.
I have Kevin Papard. Is I have to speak?
Get the timer going today. Kevin Moore at 715 Thomas Oak Park. I'll wait till you go.
Okay.
Distributed.
I'm sorry, we're digital now, so. Wait for your full time. Go ahead.
I went to the second last month's levy discussion you had. Ralph Martirre's comments were spoken as if revealed truths from an authority on high himself, and they were dead wrong. The rest of you were too polite to call him out, but politeness is not one of my virtues. The increment of the TIFs was always taxed at the same rate as everyone else, and that will continue to be true. It was just a question of where it went, and it went to the TIF fund, not individual taxing bodies. He said of the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, and I shudder to think of what kind of analyses they produce. They're a shill group for public unions. His remark that accessing the now available TIF largesse is giving away and losing a one-time opportunity that will be lost forever, and that was echoed by your CSBO, Cindy Seedor. They were both dead wrong. The only lost opportunity is to get it sub rosa without putting it to the voters. You can always get it back via an operating referendum. Any interim amount could be regained through a small bonding, also by referendum. You just don't trust your voters, and they don't trust you because of the behavior of this and past boards. You were woefully unprepared for that discussion, and you should have had a several-hour workshop on it, perhaps on the weekends. It was a once in a several decades event, and you blew it off. When I hear members like Craig Isley, normally a sane presence on this board, speak of a fiduciary duty to delay a referendum, I cringe. You've been thinking it's your duty to maximize revenue when you should realize that you shouldn't cut open the goose that lays the golden eggs. You have a duty to the people who pay for the schools also. By accumulating an outrageous surplus and continuing to take the TIF largesse, you are engaging in a massive intergenerational transfer of funds. Then the drinking binge will end, and the hangover will be awful when you finally come back to the voters. Isley's strategy of avoiding a quote-unquote hard landing on that is exactly opposite to what John Phelan and I discussed that as early as July 2016. I will explain that at a later date. You can always adjust your levy downwards. Early next year, will you show the courage to re-examine your decision? Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda Massey.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Massey. I live on Southeast Avenue. Tonight I'm reading this on behalf of Kitty Conklin because she is at the Park District meeting. On November 24th, an online petition began circulating in Oak Park that reads, Oak Park's elected government leaders find themselves at a rare moment they can provide real tax relief without making any service cuts. This painless possibility is because of new revenue that will be created by the expiration of 2 TIF districts in this community. However, every single taxing body except the village has either blown this opportunity or appears to be headed on that path, with some dramatically increasing their budgets on a year-over-year basis by as much as 10%. Boards are moving to capture these newly freed TIF funds and pad their budgets to fund projects that are future wants rather than actual needs. And once those budgets are increased, as we know, there is no turning back. This new figure establishes a new baseline for future levies and an ever-rising burden to taxpayers. As Oak Park taxpayers, we must urge our elected officials to be faithful and responsible stewards of our money. Be true to the spirit behind TIFs to rejuvenate blighted areas for the benefit of the entire community, including the benefit of distributing the tax burden across a wider base. The TIF funds are not being taken because there is a need. They are being taken because they can be taken. And the taxing bodies are hoping taxpayers won't notice. Our leaders were elected to do the right thing, not merely what is legal. Today, 25 days later, more than 1,487 people have signed that petition, indicating their support and asking your board to provide property tax relief. Please listen and act. Thank you. Kate.
Thank you. Kara Keller.
Good evening. My name is Cara Keller. I live in River Forest, and I've been a top-performing realtor in the Oak Park and River Forest markets since 2004. I'm a mom to an OPRF sophomore and a 7th grader at Roosevelt Middle School. I'm also a stepmom to 3 OPRF grads. As a 15-year veteran of our local real estate market, I'd like to share some current statistics and trends impacting the housing market in general and Oak Park in particular. As reported in a recent Crain's Chicago business article, closed home sales in Oak Park were down 22% for the first half of 2019. According to MRAD, the Chicago Area Real Estate Listing Service, and the source for the Crain's article, the length of time to sell a home in Oak Park is up 38% and is now over 100 days. And the average price per square foot is down 7% in 2019. This is the first time Oak Park has seen a significant drop in price per square foot since 2012. In a recent informal Facebook poll, residents were asked why they chose Oak Park. The common thread among the answers was diversity, proximity to both city and suburbs with good transportation, and good public schools. Today there are 7 primary threats at play that are contributing to this weak housing market. These primary threats are having the impact of less diversity of all types, increased vacancy, and reduced property values. In my opinion, the situation at play today is much different than the Great Recession. Then citizens across the entire nation were working together towards a solution. Here we are now in 2019 in Oak Park with the following set of threats impacting our local economy and our local real estate market with no clear plans or solutions. We've got a state that's got the 2nd highest property taxes in the country. We have less buyers, and when they are, Oak Park is being overlooked. We have high property taxes and older homes that require work and investment. More people are leaving the state than coming. This has been happening since 2014. We have the 2nd most migration in the country. We have 2 Oak Park middle schools, Brooks and Julian, that have declined in rankings and reviews. The primary source that home buyers go to evaluate school districts is greatschools.com. This is linked to a national website, Zillow. So when people are looking for new homes or deciding where to go, there's a link right there that shows them what the school scores are. The districts have the ability to claim those scores and to have an active part in the content on them. The federal tax deduction capped at $10,000 is another whammy. The underfunded pensions and the multiple referendums that have been passed in Oak Park. These primary threats are complicated because they have many different sources and many different participants. Not all are within Oak Park's control. But it's important to understand the full scope so the spending practices can be controlled by the governments. They're all evaluated with these threats in mind. Oak Park still claims to want to be a community that is diverse, has a history of superb architecture, great schools, and green-minded living. So I ask you, can it continue to be with these factors at play?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jean Solonian.
Marty Bernstein.
Good evening, board. Marty Bernstein. I live on Gunderson Avenue, and I saw today in the Wednesday Journal where the District 200 community lost a former teacher and dean at this school. I did not know this person, but I'm sure some of you here do, and I offer you my condolences because that's what I do. As far as the TIF and the tax, my take on it is this. I think that, and I've said this before, people who serve on boards, you give up huge amounts of your life to do it. You do it for a reason. You do it because you're doing something you really believe in and think you can make a difference for. And that's wonderful. By the same token, when you're doing that, I think that you can lose sight of half of what your job is. And half of what your job is to take care of the citizens who pay for everything that you do here. And it's easy to get away from that and not realize that there are people who are suffering financial harm in this town because of the taxes. We all know the taxes are high. No one moved to Oak Park for low taxes, but no one should have to move out because the taxes are too high. And what I would like to suggest as a way to maybe think a little bit differently about what you're going to do regarding taxes is to consider the median income in Oak Park, which is about $87,000. Half the people make below that, half the people make above that. I would like to see you sit down and figure out a budget at $87,000 and figure out what you would give up if that's all you made and how the taxes would affect you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have who signed up for the levy. Is there anyone? Okay, so one.
Maybe I'm the one.
We also have public
What is your
comment.
name?
Patty Flannery.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
So thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. My name is Patty Flannery. I grew up in Oak Park. I am one of 8 children. Grew up in a house with 1 bathroom. My grandmother lived with us. So I learned very young how to share and how to make things work. And all my life, I have voted yes to every school referendum. My kids, I moved here in 2005. My kids went K through 5. I sent them to St. Giles for middle school because of the bullying issues in the middle school. That was difficult for me, but it was worth it, right? If my kids were going to be fine, that was fine. And then they went to Oak Park High. So my daughter would get straight A's in a war zone. My son, not so much, right? So I have different kinds of kids, and I know that they need to be treated differently. So what is so troubling to me is because of this tax issue, I've just trusted our education system. I send my kids to school, I think everything's fine, I don't really pay attention. And now that I've done my due diligence, I see corruption at every turn. I was at the District 97 meeting where the board is there to represent the village and the school, and there's no concern. There's no report, there's no data. I asked for the report that the consultant presented that was full of holes. It was clearly designed to make you take the whole TIF, right? If I presented that document to my boss and took $5.2 million, I would be thrown out of his office immediately. No credentials. Then I asked for the FOIA, for the consultant and the report. They send the report and tell me that there is no contract. Okay, we have somebody doing a public report on $5.2 million or $3 million of taxpayer money, and you don't have a contract with this person? What are his credentials? Who is he? Is he a CPA? Has this been CPA certified? Who is liable if his numbers are inaccurate? No answer. So I look him up. He has a contract with Oak Park River Forest High School. He has no website. He has no telephone number. His name isn't even on his own report. Who does that? Who does a report for $5.3 million and doesn't put their name on it? And then I read, oh yeah, he got an award, I have it right here on my phone, from a superintendent roundtable for bringing billions of dollars to schools. And he's making the presentation on behalf of our village on why this is a good idea.
Ms. Flannery, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone that did not sign up?
Well, I did sign up.
This is for the taxation hearing. We also will have public comments. Just want to
Yes,
be clear.
you want to speak on the taxes.
Please come forward.
And what is your name, please?
Jones, Slanina.
Oh, I did call you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. My name is Jones Slanina. I live on 1033 South Gunderson. I'd like to ask the board to reconsider and not take their portion of the TIP, expiring TIP dollars. Although your share may be small, it's going to add considerably now that the library and District 97 and perhaps the Park District and Township are also taking theirs. At our current rate, the tax burden is causing residents and businesses to leave Oak Park. The burden is becoming unsustainable. Personally, as a retired person who's lived in Oak Park all my life, I now have to save more than $1,000 a month just to pay my property taxes. My father owned a 2-flat in Oak Park, and due to his will, his companions allowed to stay there, so we have to rent the top floor of his apartment. So for the past 4 years, we've been renting to families coming in from China to work at local universities. And for the first time, the incoming family said that they would not come to Oak Park because the schools aren't good enough. And my daughter went through the District 97 schools and Oak Park High, and I'm sad to hear that. We're taxing our seniors and lower socioeconomic groups right out of this village, and people are asking for some tax relief. That's your job, is to listen to the people in this village. We have a petition that has a lot of names on it. I'm asking that just because you can take this money does not mean that you should take this money. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? At 7:49 p.m., I'm now closing this public hearing. Next on our agenda, we have our employee and student recognition. So, last month, we started with board recognitions, and I'm honored that we are here. And help us, Chris. Okay, and our teacher of the month, please help me as we reward Chris Meglin. And Chris is new to OPRF this year and is a teacher in our TEAM program. TEAM helps prepare students with mild, moderate, and severe intellectual disabilities to live and work as independently as possible. Chris organized our first team potluck Thanksgiving feast as a culminating event for our life skills course unit. This was a big undertaking. Team students focused on all aspects of planning an event, including cooking, shopping, cleaning, decorating, greeting guests, waiting tables, and serving drinks. The event turned out to be a huge hit, and the team students were full of pride in being able to plan and pull off a party for more than 130 people, including their families, teachers, and staff. Chris has launched an Employer of the Month award to honor businesses in our community who have hired, interned, or supported one of our team students. Chris cares deeply about his students and gives so much of his time. A parent who nominated Chris wrote that she had learned so much just by sitting with Chris and his students at a soccer game and watching him interact with them. We look forward to seeing Chris's accomplishments in the years to come. So, congratulations. Our next Employee of the Month is Pat Gerwig. Pat goes above and beyond on a daily basis. She has worked tirelessly to assist all of our staff with last-minute projects, fix jams when they have been left from the night before or over the weekend, and she always has a smile. She can be running multiple machines with a room full of teachers, and she never hesitates to patiently answer questions or provide assistance. There have been multiple times when I've been doing labor-intensive work, not me, the person who wrote this, in the duplicating room, such as individually feeding finicky pages into the copier feeder, and she will offer to do the task for me so that I can attend to other aspects of my job. She is always friendly and kind, and she never complains about the machines or people. She does everything with patience and a professional assistance. Staff are always made to feel that they matter and that their print job, no matter how large or small, is important. Pat is retiring this month, and we will truly miss her expertise, kindness, and helpful nature. So, congratulations to Pat Gerwig. We'll get to celebrate her retirement.
She had a prior engagement.
Okay. And our volunteer of the month, Katrina Beck. Katrina has given her heart and soul to the OPRF Marching Huskies for 9 years, volunteering as a lead parent. In this position, she manages numerous committees and groups of volunteers to make the band program as successful as it is. She helps with uniforms, marching band football games, marching band competitions, marching band fundraising. She has also supported our theater program for many years. Recently, she emailed Ms. Bayer, the director of our winter musical Newsies, to say that she will be responsible to get the word out to the local schools to get kids in the audience. Ms. Bayer said it is such a relief to have a parent who is willing to take over such a huge task. Mr. Spada, our band director, said that what's even more important is how much she cares about our kids in this community. We will miss her expertise and assistance when our daughters graduate. Okay, and tonight we also have another very, I'm going to try not to cry. In addition to the honorees we just recognized, the Board of Education recognizes 4 true heroes of Oak Park and River Forest High School. On November 22nd, during the swim unit in Mr. Campbell's physical education class, one of our students was in distress in the pool, and he was unable to rescue himself. Unlike in the movies, drownings typically happen quietly and can go unnoticed. Mere seconds matter. Fortunately, the quick thinking and swift actions of several people saved the student's life. It is with profound gratitude that we honor the following Husky heroes who rescued our student that day. Physical education teacher Kevin Campbell, teaching assistant Lamar Lanier, student Will Martin, and student Micah Knowles. They exemplify truly those things that are best. So please. Mr. Campbell could not be with us tonight, but he did send this message. He wanted to share that none of what happened that day would be possible if it were not for Will, the lifeguard, and Micah, the student. Along with the rest of the classes, they played a role in helping out with the protocol we had set in case of emergency. These 2 are my heroes in my eyes. They will go down as PE Hall of Famers as well. Again, thank you. So first we will honor Lamar Lanier. And we have Micah Knowles.
Each person is also receiving a gift certificate to the bookstore so they can get some Husky beer. Or books. Or books.
I can send. Okay, would you? Thank you. Okay.
Congratulations.
Last but certainly not least, Will Martin.
I just want to say to the parents of Micah and Will, you should be so proud of these 2 young men. That is not to discredit Mr. Lamar, I won't pronounce your last name wrong, and Kevin. But the quick thinking of these young men is truly to be noted. It shows that they support each other and that they have their hearts at the center of truly being what examples those things that are best, true Huskies. So on behalf of the student population as well, and the staff and administration, we just want to thank you so much, because we could be doing a moment of silence today versus a moment of celebration. So thank you so much.
Okay.
Now I will turn it over to Dr. Pruitt Adams for our introductory reports.
Have to log in again. Ms. Calverton, could you give us the status on the FOIA report, please?
Yes, we've had one FOIA and it's been resolved.
Thank you. Our student council rep? Coming down, Ms. Phoebe. And you can't.
Good dedication.
Came and
You're
did the finals.
No.
You're here.
So student council, along with much of the school, has spent the last month focused on adopted family, a lot of advisory periods, launch classes, and many more parts of the school have gotten involved this year, a lot more than we've seen in the past, which is really exciting. A lot of students were raising money and purchasing goods to donate to these families, which is a great way to spread kindness through the holiday season. Student council's family in particular was a family with 2 young children, their parents and their grandmother living in the household. So we enjoyed shopping for them, wrapping their gifts at our meeting. In addition to adopted family, we worked on posters for the Spirit Assembly. Student council didn't walk in this one, but we were excited to support other clubs and activities as we enter the winter season. Finally, as you all know, finals are taking place this week. Many students are feeling the pressures of these finals, so student council wanted to do something to support our fellow students through this through their tests. So we decided to hand out gum as many students to go through the study process. So on Tuesday morning, as students arrived, we passed out gum encouraging students to stick to studying. That was our little quote. And so we're just excited to wrap up the first semester and head into second semester with new tests.
Thank you. Have a wonderful winter break.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of announcements. Senior Rise Bell attended the recent UN Climate Change Conference in Madrid, where she participated in the Youth Leaders Panel. In national news, OPRF debate team members David Griffith and Sam Sabiro are currently ranked number 18th team in the country. The Food Service Department has been recognized by the Oak Park Environment and Energy Commission on being a valuable contributor to sustainability, and the Village of Oak Park Food Service changed the packaging of its pizza kits and salads, which has diverted 142 pounds of single-use plastic from the waste stream every week. Also, last but not least, the speech team won the Give Back Challenge Award for the 6th year in a row at the District 211 Thanksgiving Let's Give Back tournament. The team collected close to 100 cans of food and donated $95 in cash. That concludes my announcements.
Thank you. Now we are at the public comments section of our board meeting, and there's
Yes, Monica Sheehan, please.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Monica Sheehan from Oak Park. I'm here tonight to speak on a few related issues. First, agenda item 8F1, board member conflict of interest. As you complete the first reading, I respectfully request that you add language to the policy that addresses a board member's inherent conflict of interest by either earning significant personal income from educational unions, or by being an active member or a leader of an educational union or organization that actively supports educational unions. This policy in its current form does not adequately reduce the risk to our community caused by such conflict of interest, as evidenced by the recent Paul Noble secret retirement deal. It will cost D200 taxpayers approximately $100,000 in the short term, and will cost all Illinois taxpayers potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in the long run. The vote was not in the best interest of taxpayers. 4 weeks ago tonight, I made a public comment that brought to light the August 22nd secret deal that 4 D200 board members granted to English teacher Paul Noble. Jackie Moore, Sarah Spivey, Ralph Martiri, and Gina Harris voted to overturn a 2017 D200 board ruling. It had rejected Paul Noble's request to rescind his 2013 irrevocable letter to retire early in 2020. The reason for the affirmative vote this time around is that the new board is overwhelmingly weighted with teacher union interests, and conflict of interest issues cloud this vote. Board member Gina Harris is a paid IEA leader, and Ralph Martiri receives significant money from teachers' unions. Ethically, they should recuse themselves from this vote and should recuse themselves from voting on any other union issue. Second, and relatedly, I respectfully request an email response from the board addressing the lack of transparency surrounding this controversial secret vote, which along with its memo are only public knowledge due to a FOIA request. The item 7F was buried in the consent agenda, and its memo was and remains unlinked in the agenda nearly 4 months later. Even though it was pulled from the consent agenda, the board president did not discuss the item when it came up for a vote. In fact, there was no discussion of the memo or its ramifications prior to its split vote. Third, I also request an email response from the board regarding its current policy on pension spiking and the board's justification for continuing the practice. Why are you spiking 6-figure salaries? D97's pension spiking policy sunsets in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin Papard.
Hello again, Kevin Papard, 715 Thomas. The other one was another meeting, technically. I don't know, some people may think I'm a naysayer with regard to this board. Who was the treasurer of your last operating referendum? And you remember when that was? Most of you don't, because you weren't involved in school affairs at that point. It was in 2002. I was the treasurer. John Hubbock was the co-president along with Ann Pepper of River Forest. You find me beating New Trier on something. You know, so they have a higher operating expense per pupil than they do. You're second in Cook County, only after Niles, where our superintendent moved to. I don't think that's anything to be proud of. Once again, I'm going to keep on bringing up the pool issue every time until the board finally discusses it in open session. I believe Matt Barron asked for that to be done, have it placed on the agenda way back when, and your discussion of the swimming requirement and how much aquatics is needed determines your need for pool capacity, and you're letting the administration, the PE department, and the athletic department set your priorities and your policies, and you're abrogating your fiduciary responsibilities. I'm going to keep bringing it up. Also, you pay $19,000 a year to Forecast 5 to run a financial model that you use perhaps once a year. Why can't you design your own in Excel? It's not that hard to do. It's harder to do if you want to make it user-friendly, but somebody could knock it off in about a week for internal use here. And the person who sells that service to you, Steve Miller, also sits on your financial advisory committee, so that seemed like a little self-dealing to me. Why is he on there? Finally, in the near future, I will be following up with a formal FOIA request on something I sent you once before, and I had in a Wednesday general comment about achievement records in detail by race, family status, such as whether it's a broken family and so on, so that can be independently analyzed. I believe you have that information, and it can be given in a form that disguises student identities and doesn't violate any privilege. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Is there anyone that did not sign up that would like to make a public comment? Then I will move into our consent agenda and ask if there are any individual items board members want pulled for
think there's some language change.
Which one would you like to pull for individual?
And not for consideration, I just think some language changes need to be made to one of the policy
Then you
issues.
both. So just tell me which one.
It is 220.
Okay.
And paragraph 3, including determining language doesn't quite flow, there needs to be some sort of
Okay,
transition.
we're not there
It's
yet.
just language. Yeah. It's just language.
So I move to approve the following consent items. A, check disbursements and financial resolutions dated December 19, 2019. B, monthly treasurer's report. C, acceptance of audit report. D, Ballard Technologies abatement contract for 2020 capital improvement projects. E, personnel recommendations, including new hires, stipend positions, transfers, resignations, release. F, policies for first reading. 1, 2100 board member conflict of interest. 2, 2110 qualifications, term, and duties of board officer. 3, 2020 powers and duties of the Board of Education indemnification. 5, 2020-30 public participation in Board of Education meetings and petitions to the board. 6, 4150 facility management and building programs. 7, 5120 employee ethics, conduct, and conflict of interest. 8, 550 drug and alcohol-free workplace, e-cigarette, tobacco, and cannabis prohibition. And 9, policy 8:30 visitors to and conduct on school property. G, open and closed minutes of November 21st and December 10th. The date cut off. 19? 20, 18? 2019, and a declaration that the closed session audio tapes of May 2018 shall be destroyed. And ask for a second.
I'm sorry, second.
Mr. Isley?
Yes.
Mr. Martieri?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Coxey?
Yes.
Ms. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Barron?
Yes.
And Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Thank you.
And now I move to approve board policy for first read, 2200 school board meeting procedures, and ask for a second.
Second.
And then Ralph, your comments.
Yeah, so in the change language on line 3, employing a superintendent and other personnel, making employment decisions, dismissing personnel, including determining whether an employee is willfully or negligently failed to report an instance of suspected child abuse.
Can you put your mic on, Ralph?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
There seems to, there's some language needed to make what we are actually doing, that our powers and duties are, for the including part, which doesn't flow from the prior language. It's just a transitional thing. So if you just work out that transitional thing, it'll be fine. It's just a language, it's just a language change,
All right. Any other questions or comments?
not a substance.
Thank you. So we can have those roll call.
It can be voice vote. Voice vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you. Our first discussion item for tonight is the racial equity procedure update. Coming forward to make the presentation is Dr. LaVar Ammons. As you recall, in September of 2018, part of the board goals was to make the outcomes for our students not racially predictable. The board approved the racial equity policy in the spring of 2019. In the fall of 2019, in August, we brought forward to the board a timeline for the development of the procedures. Dr. Ammons is here tonight to give you an update on the progress. This item is in compliance with Strategic Plan Priority 1, Racial Equity, and Board Policy 7:10, 7:12. Dr. Ammons.
All right, good evening. Right, so as Dr. Pruitt Adams explained in the introduction, we're at the point now where we are looking to have the actual policy mandate the administrative procedures to ensure full implementation of the racial equity policy. Just as a quick update, or reminder, is that there are 12 total components to the racial equity policy. We've identified 6 that think about, our policy and the procedures, of course, there's a sense of urgency around being able to move the needle towards racial equity. But we also have to be mindful that this is a process that is, that will, of course, take some time. And the scope of these procedures are both, deep as well as detailed and broad. So then, in our work, we're mindful that this process itself, is one that is cyclical, recursive, and it's not a linear process. So again, we were pushing forward to implementation as fast as we can. In the procedure development timeline, number one, we have to be sure we are critical in our current practices and being able to focus on equity lens, having an honest reflection of our own assumptions and approaches to racial equity in education, which is ongoing, and being engaging to our stakeholders throughout this process. And then ultimately we'll look to determine, can you hear me? Okay, then we'll look to determine the action steps for implementation going into the second semester. So with that, the focus of this presentation this evening is to, number one, provide an update as to the progress of where we are for the policy procedure development. Secondly, an overview of 6 developed drafts of the racial equity procedures, and then we will go into a deep dive on the racial incident protocol procedure update. So what you're looking at now is the racial equity procedure progress sheet. And this is a tool that we use to ensure that we stay on track with the implementation, or the development and the implementation of our procedures. So you can click anywhere on this sheet, and it will give you direct access to the PDF. Now, in these 6 columns, you have information relating to the racial equity policy and the procedure development. So in that first column, you have the policy item itself. And that's, again, 1 through 12. The ones that are highlighted in green are the current procedures that we have language for that have been developed, and they are complete drafts. These drafts can obviously be updated and edited at this time, but these are the most complete parts of the policy development that we have to date. Secondly, in the second column, there is the policy language. So this is the what and the why, what we're trying to do as it relates to each one of those policy items. The very next column, the procedures, that is the actual how, the how-to, how are we going to get done what the actual procedures are asking of us. The ones that are highlighted, or the active links, you can click directly on those and have access to the updated language for all of those procedures. Again, the total 6 that we'll be talking about this evening. Right next to that, you have the development status of each one of these of the procedure items. It'll let you know what's in progress and what is a complete draft. Right next to that, you have the metrics and evidence, which will serve as a general marker as to our progress towards implementation and moving that needle towards racial equity. And then you have the last column, our policy references. So then each one of the policy items in the first column are corresponding with board policies, and that's the reference for those. So before we actually implement any part of our policy, we'll of course do a legal review to make sure that we are in compliance with board policy. So then before we get into the actual equity analysis, I wanted to speak a little bit about an equity audit. When I first came in at the start of this semester, I sat down with the district equity leadership team, and we discussed the importance of having an equity audit done just to give us some baseline information as to what our school culture and learning environment is like in terms of do we have a readiness for racial equity work. In those discussions, we realized that there's some preparation to be had in putting together an equity audit. So things to consider. Number one, who is the consultant who's going to do an equity audit? Secondly, what are we trying to highlight? What are the data points that we're trying to get from an equity audit. Third, how much is it going to cost to do this equity audit? So, and all those things to consider, we're continuously having conversations about an audit and again, get that baseline information. During our time throughout this semester, especially early on, we had a conversation, the district equity leadership team, that is with several consultants regarding an equity audit and what that could potentially look like. We had an opportunity to sit and meet with Dr. Yvette Dubiel from the DuPage County Regional Office of Education. She is their Executive Director of Equity, and she's probably at this time conducting multiple equity audits for multiple schools within the DuPage County area. We've also had conversations with Ms. Corey Wallace, who a little bit ago had conducted an equity audit for Evanston. We've also had some, myself, I've had some conversations with Ms. B. Young from B. Young and Associates, who performed the equity audit back in high school district DuPage 88 to start that equity work in that district. So, the conversations are being had there. Thirdly, when we talked about the equity audit and all these factors that go into it, the idea came about that perhaps we could do a cross or multi-district equity audit. Number one, to have a collective thought around what it is that we are doing as it relates to equity work, providing common language, right, for the students that we serve, and obviously mitigating the cost of some of the equity audits itself. So there's been conversations with representatives from District 90 and District 97 in terms of partnering to do an equity audit to again galvanize and unify the voice of our school communities. So then going into our equity analysis. So this is a critical component of our policy and the procedures because ultimately the goal of the racial equity impact assessment is to mitigate implicit bias, to mitigate any racial disparities in our decision making as leadership. What we can do is we'll click and go right into the procedure itself. So as we look at the format of our procedure here, what we'll have is the actual equity policy language, and then it will delineate the intent of the procedure as we go down the list. So then as we're looking at the equity analysis, the objective of this is to mitigate any racial inequities, implicit bias in our decision making. So as we use this tool, we'll use it to filter all of the decisions that we make, whether we're talking about curriculum, assessment, discipline disparities, allocation of resources and such. This is the tool we'll run those decisions through. And when we're thinking about these questions, these 5 questions in particular, they're intently focused on, okay, well, what is the impact on the underrepresented or racial groups in this decision? How are we intentionally involving stakeholders from underrepresented populations? What are the barriers within our decisions to push us towards more, keep us from wanting to have more equitable circumstances? And then how are we going to then address those barriers? So again, in going through this process, we'll be able to, again, filter our decision making and be more intentional and mindful of race and how our decisions impact race and can potentially create more disparities. So the stakeholder and community engagement, ultimately we're looking to provide some intentional, targeted outreach to, again, underrepresented populations in our community to make sure that they are welcomed into our school district. And again, we'll go to the policy item, or the procedure, I'm sorry. Again, we'll have the actual language laid out for us to start, and then we can go into what the stakeholder and community engagement is. Now, for each one of these policy items, we will have the racial equity analysis, our tool in front of us, just to remind us is that this is the lens in which we'll use to implement our policies. So just a few points, and again, I won't read each bullet point, but number one, we'll have to utilize or continue to utilize our outreach, our community outreach coordinator. I have to give a shout out to LaTanya Jackson, who's done a wonderful job with reaching out to, again, underrepresented stakeholders, whether it be the back to school rally, the parent celebrations and such. Adopt a family, she's really been able to be out in the community and touch base with those stakeholders. As we value racial equity here in our district, I think it's very important to be able to include our community in on conversations as it relates to racial equity. So whether it's book studies, reviews, conversations, racial equity trainings, our goal is to then increase the racial consciousness of our community in order to again move that needle for racial equity. And then we have diverse workplace initiatives. So the net goal of the diverse workplace initiatives is to support, retain, and develop racially and linguistically diverse teachers, faculty, and staff to come to our institution, provide opportunities for mentorship in order to retain our staff of color and linguistically diverse staff. And of course, to identify and analyze causes for diverse employee turnover. So then going into the policy itself, we have the diverse workplace initiative intro, and ultimately we're looking to implement innovative processes to publicize our advertisements towards various institutions like historically Black colleges and universities, being sure that we implement, continue to develop our own program, and make sure that this is all in alignment with the talent management plan. So there is room, or we have the nuance of the talent management plan that the racial equity policy or the procedure will then be able to highlight. And again, in looking at our procedures, we then again will continue to use that racial equity tool to be mindful of our decisions in our hiring practices. So that is welcoming school environment, again offering an emotionally supportive environment, welcoming all of our students, making sure that the space is welcoming for our staff as well. Then we'll take a look at this procedure as well. This procedure here has a total of 3 components to it. The good thing is that we're already working with our culture of warmth and belonging, which we started this year, ensuring that students are feeling welcome coming into the building, whether that is more presence of administrators and teachers in the hallways, teachers welcoming students into class while also ushering them off to make sure they get to their other classes on time, recognition of peers, just like we had the employee recognitions and volunteer recognitions here that all contribute to our culture of warmth. Then it goes on to campus safety, and we really have to be mindful of campus safety as they are a key contributor to making sure that our environment is welcoming and safe. How does campus security treat students? How do they treat staff and faculty? What are the trainings that are put into place for safety and security to create that culture of warmth and a welcoming school environment? And then as far as the emotional support and safety, we'll again utilize a multi-tiered system of support. Of course, the initial thought for an MTSS process is it would be an academic support, but there's also room to develop social emotional supports within that MTSS structure, especially as we think about trauma-informed practices and also restorative justice practices with circle keeping and such as a part of that structure. So then we move on to culturally responsive and relevant teaching and learning. Within this section of the policy, we are are seeking to consider diverse perspectives of students, faculty, staff as it relates to the evaluation and the development of our curriculum. These things are already happening by way of our curriculum evaluation and design manual. There's already processes set up in there to then have focus groups with diverse perspectives to then take into consideration how we select tests or text and also formulate our assessments and such. And that is also the nuance of this procedure here itself is provided by the curriculum evaluation and design model. And again, we'll run these decisions through our racial equity tool. And then last but not least, we have the racial incident protocol, which the outline of this procedure, or the call of this procedure, is to provide an opportunity for staff and students and other district personnel to be able to report any sort of racial misconduct that happens here on our campus. So we'll take a bit of a deeper look into the racial incident protocol and how, in fact, students, staff, and again, district personnel would report an incident of racial misconduct. So then starting out with the racial incident protocol, we have our definition of terms that we've taken directly from the policy itself. Then there's an incident of racial bias, so there's a definition for that. So it speaks to how discrimination can both be explicit and implicit. And then just below that, we have some examples of a racial incident, so whether that be unwelcoming comments onto unequal treatment, unequal application of District 200 policies, down to physical assaults and threats, just some definitions of what a racially charged incident could be. And then there's the reporting process. So then starting out, there are a few ways that students and staff would be able to report a racially charged incident or an incident of racial misconduct. First, we would have a reporting form that would be accessible on our website. So if they could not get in touch with a member of the racial incident reporting team, they'd be able to go in and just give us or provide us information on a specific incident that had happened, so it could then be followed up with by the racial incident reporting team. So just basic information as your name, who are you reporting for, the incident location, and ultimately a description of the incident. And then for a face-to-face or physical reporting of any racial incident, for students, they would go to a student racial incident response manager, which would be one of our deans or one of two deans. For employees, there is an employee racial incident response manager, which would be both the associate superintendent, assistant superintendent of human resources, and then the racial incident response coordinator would be the position of executive director of equity and student success. For the racial incident response coordinator, that responsibility is to then oversee the protocol and the process of the reporting process. And then who should report? We have here for students, again, as I just stated before, students will report to the student racial incident report manager for allegations against an employee, campus visitor, outside contractor, or even against another student. For employees, again, they would report directly to the employee racial incident response manager to either report a student or a campus visitor or outside contractor. And then we can go into the response to report. So in properly addressing these issues, we would advise the reporting party as to what resources are available for them once they report. Then we outline the responsibilities of the racial incident response team in terms of receiving any complaints. And then we have some language here about retaliation being a direct violation of anyone who would be reporting, anyone who would retaliate against the reporter would have, there would be grounds for disciplinary action. And then we highlight disciplinary action and what that looks like. So it can be anything from verbal reprimands to suspension, expulsion and such from Oak Park and River Forest High School. And then there is the matter of being intentionally dishonest of any reports of racial misconduct to ensure that folks are being honest in their reporting. So those are the 6 policy procedures that we have in place to this point, and I will leave it open for questions from the board.
I had 2 areas I'd like to hear a little more about. And this is a follow-up to some questions that I had asked. One is, as I look at the procedures through the 6 different areas, I see them kind of varying in level of specificity, level of depth. I think, for example, the incident reporting is pretty prescriptive, and some of the others are, I would say, higher level, at least from my understanding. And one of the purposes of procedure, from my perspective, is to assure that there is the utmost consistency. So, and the response, you got to balance that with flexibility. So, can you talk to what your view is on that? Because there are different levels of specificity.
Sure. And you made the point of not being sure that we don't lock ourselves into language and have flexibility, right? When we go back to, culturally responsive and relevant teaching, for instance. When we go into this policy or this procedure, the specificity in these bullet points, of course, don't outline that, but the specificity itself is in the curriculum evaluation and design manual. That can then be, so the specificity is in this, again, the curriculum evaluation and design manual. The same can be said for the talent management program or the talent management plan. And then again, in using these documents, we would then use the racial equity impact assessment tool to drive decisions to ensure that, again, we are being equitable in our decision making.
Bart, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, just as you're talking, I think, for example, culturally responsive pedagogy. What I would be interested in understanding is in terms of procedures and our goal with our strategic plan of viewing our work through a racial equity lens, what would be procedures that would, for your work, that would be pulled out there, because that is not specific to the racial equity policy, but to the manual. So how would you use that for procedures?
The culturally responsive pedagogy. So then we would have to, for the procedures itself, have to then outline the language from this document to then be able to determine the process of how we would go about being professional or being culturally responsive in our pedagogy. And of course, there is professional development that has to be put together around that as well.
I'm sorry, Tom.
I have a different question. But my other question or topic is related to the equity tool. And this one is at least new to me. In looking what is it going to really look like, and so how can we see what it will be doing. You preview it, look at other external cases, or just understand what the output of it will look like. I understand the questions, etc., but what's it going to look like? Are there examples from other? There's reference to, I think, Portland, or can we see the work of others just to get a better sense of it?
Sure, yeah, I'm in the process of gathering some information from Portland as well as Race Board on specific examples as to how the tool is not only used but the result that it produces.
Could I interject? I think the term tool can also be misleading. The questions, from my understanding, is the questions are the tool. It's the process you use. And so, for the audience's sake, it's not a specific document that looks a certain way. It's the questions and then how you process those questions to drive to the response that you have. I just wanted to define that tool is not something.
Sure.
But I mean, ultimately, the tool is going to be used to help decision making.
Absolutely.
So just to get a better sense of seeing how that has looked will be beneficial as this matures. I know this is the beginning, but that's what. Until I see that, it's going to be. It's somewhat cloudy.
I just have a follow-up question and comment. It kind of, I think, builds on what you're asking for, Tom. Correct me if it's not, but what would help me to understand at some point more clearly are some example scenarios. Right? Here's how it's been done in the past, whether it's here or generally in educational settings, and here's how it will be different now based on the implementation of these policies and and it could be composite cases, right? No need to necessarily identify a specific instance, but just some common themes, and as many diverse examples as possible, because I know that this is everybody. It's not just a classroom setting or just for students, it's across the board. And so you can even have a school board member scenario and give you permission. So, for myself, you can use me. You use my name as well. So, Tom, you seem to kind of concur that that's part of what you're driving at? Okay, thumbs up. Thank you.
Yeah, the whole use of the Portland tool in the equity audit or analysis seems like some simple questions, but the questions I have is, so how's it going to be conducted and how's it going to be documented and what are we going to do with all of it as we go forward? It seems like a huge review.
Yeah, as far as how it will be, the data that we collected from it and the conducting of it, that will be, of course, there's professional development that has to be had behind that, but it's as, we could, have these questions visible at all of our meetings. So I spoke with Boston Public Schools, and the way they operationalize their tool is they are required, every department in the school district is required to utilize the tool at least twice a year, whether it be in curriculum development process, whether we're looking at reviewing policy, procedure, it has to be documented and then reviewed by their Office of Equity to then ensure that it's being used in the proper way.
So to follow up, so you see something more like that versus some formal review or some formal requirements to when it's used?
Well, yeah, there are the formal requirements and formal reviews that they use as well in public school districts.
Okay. But in addition to that, then new things or things that are going on, they require.
Correct.
Okay. Still, it gets into a question of when you do a review, how does it get documented and what happens to it?
That was actually part of my question. Well, it's a two-part question. The first part is, when you're using this racial equity lens, are you anticipating that each department, as you work with like how do you plan to use it with each team? Like, and then once you have that information and those questions are answered, what are you doing to circle back to see what's happened that's been an outcome that has been different?
So then there would have to be a collection of baseline data prior to the use of the tool. Again, with the professional development that would have to come along with using this tool, we would then be able to could you rephrase your question, please?
Yeah, the first part was about having this information and making sure that departmentally, who's going, how is every department as they're moving through their processes of planning and developing going to use it? Like, who do you anticipate using the lens on a regular basis? And then once you've had that information, they've moved through this lens,
Right.
done the lens work, how are you monitoring what the outcomes have been based on them doing that work?
Right. So then who would be using the tool? We could look at the model again that Boston Public Schools uses, where they gave training to all of their leadership positions, the division heads, and then the tool would be then utilized by those leaders to make the various assessments on decision making process. From there, that data could then be collected and then processed to ensure that we're making gains in the differences of our curriculum, of everything that we do.
Yeah, because it was question 5 that's in there on the analysis, how will you mitigate the negative impacts and address the barriers identified above? That's where I'm hoping that we'll see some level of accountability of the outcome once they've moved through that process. What would be something we would see as an outcome for each area as they move through that process.
Thank you.
And so as they use the tool and apply it to analyze things like pedagogy, et cetera, where does coming up with suggested changes tie into research or evidence-based strategies that have been shown to actually work in these situations? Is that part? Because I did not see that in here and I was sort of looking for that.
Could you repeat? I'm trying to capture the questions. So as we go back and look at the draft, we can make sure that some of the questions that are being asked are incorporated. That's the specificity that I hear that the board is looking for. And I couldn't grasp what you were saying.
Okay, I'm just saying, so you utilize the tool, you're analyzing, let's say, pedagogy, because that's just an easy one to talk about. So these are instructional practices. And now you're identifying areas where you want to improve pedagogy based on your utilization of the tool, where you go onto the tool and say, hey, we need to make some changes because we've impacted. So where does, in that process, where do you then transition to a situation where, and as you're utilizing the tool to resolve practice, you tie the resolution into evidence or research-based approaches that have been shown to actually work. I did not see that nexus in here, and I was looking for that nexus. Sure. And that's a way, there's a number of different practices that can be used, but we also know that a number, the research and or the evidence, and they're different, but the research or the evidence indicate actually resolve these issues. So where does that come into the process?
And that's something that we would have to develop to make sure we implement going forward.
I would think that that'd be an important piece as you're solving the problem, right? You don't want to be trying to invent new wheels when in fact there are research-based and or evidence-based practices in many of these areas that have been shown to close these and or eliminate gaps. And we would want to start, I think, using research or evidence-based practices.
Thank you.
So then I had a question. It sounds like, can you explain to me your process in terms of coming up with the procedures? Have you been working with staff and faculty to come, or is this something that's, I'm just wondering about buy-in, right? Buy-in from the rest of the school community, because right now it sounds, especially on paper, it seems very sort of logical in its procedures. This really is a sea change, I think, for the way we've been doing business traditionally in this building.
Sure.
And so I'm curious, because the implementation, of course, is going to be really largely dependent on the folks who are using it.
Correct.
So what sorts of communications have been going on around trying to find common ground and consensus and move forward together?
Right. So then we have our procedure development teams that have met throughout the course of the semester, and then there are the individual working groups. So there are administrators and teachers who are specifically in corresponding areas of each element of the procedure or of the policy that then gets together in working groups to then flesh out the language for the procedure. In the second semester, as we delve deeper into the policy itself, there's going to be more of an effort to have more teacher input as well as student input into it.
Do you want to speak to your stakeholder group? That's also with the community and
Yeah,
parents.
that's the one I was referring to. Yeah, the student or the family and stakeholder group that's met over the course of the first semester of 4 times.
That stakeholder group includes, that stakeholder group includes educators in the building?
Correct. Yeah, educators in the building, students, and community stakeholders. And there was also you were on the email list for that as well.
And then we had this past week, there were 2 people who heard about it who have done research in racial equity work. I want to say one at the University of Chicago. There were 2 people who showed up that said they had heard. One was representing a former student who indicated this work was going on, and they too have asked to join the larger stakeholder group.
Not faculty, outside.
These are outside.
I have another question when we're looking at the diverse workplace initiatives. I'm seeing, and I know that we've talked about talent management plan, and some of these pieces are very familiar, and I'm seeing the piece about mentoring program opportunities, right, provide leadership and mentoring opportunities to diverse employees as part of retention, I would imagine, right?
Correct.
I'm not seeing as much in the rest of the document about how that procedurally will look. And I'm curious about some of those pieces of the procedures around retention. So we know that retention is sometimes just as challenging as the recruitment piece.
You said retention?
Yeah, retention. So of course we have our mentoring program here. There's been other ideas and looking at a group that I co-founded, the Black Educators Network of Suburban Chicago. We had talked about, or are in the midst of creating an off-site mentoring program that could be service to multiple institutions just throughout the suburban Chicagoland area. So again, these are ideas that have to continue to be developed as it relates to retention.
Is there affinity space provided already in the building for teachers of color?
Yes, we have the Black Leadership Advisory Council. They have been in existence for quite some time, but I think it's more so communicating that they are available and that space is an opportunity for affinity.
Yeah, I'm also thinking Asian Pacific Islander, Native American, Alaska.
Sure, I don't know.
Like the other 4
Right,
categories.
yeah.
As well, Hispanic, Latino.
Right, to my understanding, at this point, I've not heard of any affinity spaces, but those can certainly be created.
Just sort of strategically, as you leverage this, as you build this out in these procedures, you're, for the most part, heavily impacting other procedures that we're already doing. And how are you making sure that you're integrating and not duplicating? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, how are you thinking about that problem?
Yeah. I think it's a matter of then pulling up those policies and cross cross-referencing to make sure that there's no overlap or that duplicating that would occur.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I really appreciate Craig's question about the integrating piece, because it's such an established culture here. I'm just curious how, I know that Sarah touched on it a little bit too, but I'm just curious about the embedding of some of what this policy really means into the culture of the space, and how that's done systemically, and how the thought process is with your team around doing this systemically.
Sure. As far as the systemic piece and bringing that to the forefront, well, this is a policy that will be implemented. Of course, having conversations with the faculty senate as a communication piece is a start for us there.
And I guess I'm thinking along the lines of actually convening the groups to change existing policies rather than writing an equity policy over the top, and making sure that we're taking the time to get the right stakeholders involved in changing existing policies.
Yeah, that would be a process. Again, upon further review would have to be developed.
Can I ask for clarification? When you say policies, are you saying the procedures, how we do, okay, that's what I'm thinking.
Talent management procedure, for example, might need to be rewritten rather than overlaid per se.
I think one of the benefits of the development of these procedures, as I see it, is not, I hear you say, not throwing out what we have, but really taking what we have and how do we enhance that so it's not duplication. That's one of the intents behind using the racial analysis. Taking what we currently have, and if you saw in the procedure, there's an asterisk by every single section that says we have to take it through that lens. And so the notion is, prior to, as we move forward, I'm going to use the talent management one for example. As we move forward, taking what we currently have through that lens and then tweaking it versus throwing that out and starting something new.
Any other questions? I guess my the only question I have at this point is trying to get a sense of a timeline and when you'll be coming back to kind of update, because I do feel with all the questions I've heard this evening that and I guess the model that I've had in my head was with the gender policies, procedures, excuse me. And so right now I'm struggling a little bit to have a real idea of kind of how this unfolds and the equity analysis, not how that's going to inform what's already rolling in a sense would be helpful to understand, because my understanding is that's not going to start until next school year.
The equity analysis?
The audit.
No,
the audit.
The audit would potentially start, we'll look to start next year with the audit, but as far as the equity analysis, that could be implemented going into second semester in terms of looking at our practices through that equity lens.
So I guess what I'm saying is that if that is the plan, it would be helpful to see what that looks like. And because right now it feels very almost a little too theoretical and broad. I'm trying to get a sense of OPRF in this in these procedures, and I'm not seeing that right now. And the question I always have with this type of thing is that, you know, even things that on your list that said completed, I'm not quite sure what that means given the information we've been provided, if there is, you know, more documentation. But how are we going to know this is working? And that's the piece that is crucial, feels like a big hole to me right now. I don't understand. I'm also unclear on what the committee's been doing, to be honest. It's not reflected here as to how those inputs. So if that could be made available, that would be helpful.
There is a timeline for updates to the board, and I remember it's on there. Next one is in February. We can look. Here is a timeline for different reports to the board, and so if I'm hearing, this really kind of goes back to the examples and time, and for what does that look like in real time is what we're doing now. To make that more clear, how that relates to Oak Park and how we're going to utilize that tool. Is that what you're saying?
That's yes, and this has been a little challenging for me because I feel like we've spent this time kind of scaffolding that work as opposed to responding to it or reacting to it, and the sense of urgency that we have had around this work needs to be reflected in February in a way that shows the specificity and the details, because I feel like we're losing time, and we don't have it to lose. Any other questions or comments? And I know this will also be reviewed with CCD